Greetings, everyone. This is Jennifer Shryock, and these are the RAIN sessions where I get to interview wonderful and lovely people about how they found their purpose. Today, I'm so excited to reconnect with my friend, Sunny Joy McMillan, and talk to you. So I'm going to jump right in with our first question and let my guests get to know you through your answers. Sunny, what kind of work did you do before you felt called to this new thing?
Okay. And I just have to say, I love the questions that you ask in these, Jennifer. They're just like, this is my happy place, is to talk about purpose and calling and all that good stuff. So I actually was an attorney, and I did some super sexy practice work that was like healthcare regulatory on the state level. So it was, as we like to call it, the social self that I was really living for at that time. So yeah, I was an attorney practicing, and then I actually I got married, and I left the practice of law after several years, and didn't work. We didn't have kids, but we traveled a lot, and I supported him in his law practice in certain ways. And so yeah, I went from attorney for several years to not working for several years.
And I've heard you call it Real Housewives.
Yeah, it kind of was. I mean, I have such a problem. This is not the time or place to go into this, but I have such a problem with our Real Housewives culture, because I see these women who have so much to offer, and I just see them not using what I think are some of their greatest gifts. That they have available to them. But that was maybe the reason that I don't care for it so much, is because that's exactly what I was doing. And I knew that there was something inside that I was meant for something more. But yeah, my ex-husband was a very successful attorney who had his own firm. And I feel very blessed to have been able to live a lifestyle that was beyond anything I could have ever imagined when I was younger. But that I felt like a real housewife given the lifestyle, but I was a bored real housewife who used all that excess energy and the little voice that kept telling me I was meant for something more. I just kept stuffing it under lots of alcohol and lots of drugs and lots of partying and lots of girls trips. So it was a very, I don't want to denigrate what I was able to experience, because I do feel very blessed, but there was a certain point where it was not enough.
Right. And my hunch is we'll circle back to that and how that guided you. And yeah, my hunch is that you are sensing that some of these other Real Housewives might be called to more as well.
Maybe.
But back to lawyering, back to your days as an attorney. Were you good at it? Did you excel? Was it fulfilling?
Yeah. Well, so, I mean, you probably have to ask the partners I worked for the real answer on that. But I will say, from the reviews that I got and from the feedback that I received, I did excel at it. I wouldn't say that I was happy doing it. You know, every time I'd show up in the office and the voicemail light would be blinking, I would get a sick feeling in my stomach, which now I understand it happens to a lot of people at their jobs. But yes, while I did well enough at it, I was incredibly insecure behind the scenes and feeling very, lots of emotional and physical symptoms that were telling me this was not what I needed to be doing.
Wow. Ooh, juicy. You know, I love that symptom stuff. Oh, the language of the body. Okay, so we're going to circle back to what triggered the change. But first, what do you do now? What's your current work?
Yeah. Well, so I call myself a recovering attorney and a practicing coach. And I will just say, most people, if they decide to become a coach, they do some homework and they find the right school and they think maybe, maybe I'll do corporate coaching or maybe I'll do this. That is not how I quite literally followed breadcrumbs from the universe and fell into what I do now. I help women primarily, although I do have a handful of men, and that number is growing and I'm really enjoying working with them. So maybe I need to amend that to say I help adults who are unhappy in their relationship, mainly marriage, get unstuck. And because that's where I was for many years, even though it looked really good on the outside, I had a very dysfunctional marriage behind the scenes. And I know what that's like to keep up a facade of perfection, but know that you are deeply unhappy behind closed doors. So I help other people get unstuck. And that doesn't necessarily mean divorce. For some people, that's in the highest and best interest, but not everybody. So we meet them where they are and hopefully get them to a better place.
There's a little book behind you. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So I wrote my first book in 2017, and it will be in bookstores in December 2018. And it's called Unhitched, Unlock Your Courage and Clarity to Unstick Your Bad Marriage. And it basically is part memoir about my life, living, Instagram perfect on the outside, really unhappy on the inside. And then the other part of the book is my process. And this was a process, while I had a really high conflict marriage, it was pretty bad. We had a very graceful divorce. And post-divorce, we had one of the most beautiful friendships that you can imagine. We got along so much better than we ever did while we were married. And that took a lot of work. And all of the work that I put into that, I put in the book, in my process. And so these are all tools that you can use while you're still in your marriage. And it may make, change the stagnation, or it may get you unstuck, or it may get you in touch with the bedrock of your integrity, that it's time for you to go. In which case, because of my legal background, I did just enough family law to be dangerous. So I can help guide people through a gentler divorce than I think what is traditionally available.
Beautiful. Boy, I love that phrase, the bedrock of your integrity. That's really funny.
Is that from Martha? I think that's probably from Martha Beck.
It may be. I like it. Okay. So walk us through what occurred to help you get in touch with that bedrock of your own integrity and make the change from attorney and housewife to this work that you're doing now, helping other people get unstuck.
Yeah. So it was not a fast transition, Jennifer. I would say it was over a decade that I knew. Actually, let me back that up. When did I go to law school? Yeah, it was over a decade for sure. I knew that I did not want to be an attorney. I knew there were huge red flags as I entered my relationship with my, boyfriend who became my husband. There were so many red flags, and there was always this little voice inside that I knew the voice wanted something different, but I just suppressed and I suppressed and I suppressed it. And then there came a point where there was just so much garbage piled on top of it that there was nowhere else to put it. And and then the little voice as I became more unhappy, it became a louder voice until there were times when it felt like it was screaming. I still didn't know what to do with it. And two things happened. One of them, I went to Burning Man for the first time, which is a spiritual experience like I had never had before. And I saw people who were living from their most authentic, essential selves without any concern as to what was going on around them. Everyone just shed their social skin, and really like their clothing skin and everything skin. I wasn't one of the naked people, but there are plenty of them there. But anyway, you shed everything and you just show up as who you are. And that really resonated for me. So I knew that was possible. I saw people doing it, even if it was in this utopian little, 10-day society or city. And the second thing was the writing of Martha Beck. I was very serendipitously connected with one of her articles in O Magazine. And it was the article about the social and the essential self. And it was the way that she articulated it was the way that I had always known inside, but didn't have words for it. And she put it on paper, and she was actually living it. And so the light bulb went off, and I realized it was a house of cards or an armor of externals, whatever metaphor you want to use, but it was all created for the social self. And I knew, oh gosh, that little voice that was inside all along, that was my essential self. And it is about damn time that I listened to it, because, and Jennifer, I don't mean to exaggerate this, but it literally felt from an intuitive sense like I would not be on this planet as long as I could be if I did not listen to this. Like if I didn't change my life and step into what I was supposed to be doing, that I would leave the planet sooner. So for some people that may sound like an exaggeration, it felt very real to me. So I don't know, we may never know.
Wow. And Sunny, what is it that you were called to do?
Yeah. So, the wee portal through which I connect with people is, of course, through the work of helping people get unstuck from unhappy marriages. But really, if I take the overall umbrella, the thing that lights me up, this is the reason why I do my radio show and a lot of the work outside of my coaching practice that I do, is because I want to connect people with who they really are. I believe that it is possible for us as humans to live lives of peace, of joy, of freedom, and of purpose. But there's, as I mentioned before, there's usually a whole lot of garbage on top of that. Messages from family of origin, from religion, from culture, from any number of places. And it takes stripping away of all that to get to the essential core spiritual being that I believe we really are in these human bodies. And I feel very called to connect people with that. And it saddens me because I also see, again, this was my own life. Because I was putting so much effort into my dysfunctional marriage just to keep it limping along, that energy was energy that could not be spent somewhere else. So every day that I came home and got in a fight with my husband, every day that I spent trying to physically or mentally figure out how I was going to keep things looking good from the outside, that was all energy I could have been putting toward my calling. And so that's one of the reasons I'm really passionate about this particular niche of work, is I want people to be freed up so that they can do the work that they came here to do and ultimately connect them with a life of peace, of joy, of freedom, of purpose.
Amen, sister. Oh, we are speaking the same language here, as we always have. I've known that from the very beginning. For those of you who have read my blog post, How I Found My Calling, I reference Rainbow Unicorn. And that is Sunny Joy McMillan. So,
I'm so honored to have been mentioned in your blog.
That was a big moment for me. And I feel like, so that was a turn for me to find my purpose. And I don't want to make this about me, but to tie in how you and I have been seeking purpose and calling from that moment when we both were asking Martha Beck a calling question.
Yes, exactly. Gosh, yeah, because I knew it was there, as I know you did too. It's not always a clear path. And it takes, at least in my experience, so much trust that if you make the leap, the net will appear. Because when I walked away from that lifestyle or that life, I mean, it was everything. I walked away from the lifestyle. I walked away from the marriage. I walked away from everything without any knowing that there would be something better on the other side, or even something as good. But there was just a sense that I had to do it. That's the calling. I was called. I had to follow it. Yeah, you know how that goes.
Well, I kind of do, except that I didn't really think it was there. I thought I'd been left out of the calling game. And so in that moment where you and I were both asking, Martha, by the way, had been talking to somebody who did know her calling. She told Martha, but was too afraid to take action on it. And Sunny and I both were wondering what Martha might have said to this person if she'd answered, no, I don't really know what my calling is. And I wanted to know that because I did not feel called. And so we both asked this question in a room full of strangers. What if we don't have a calling? And I really thought that, well, she'll give me some, consolation prize. Well, you missed the boat, but here are a few steps to take. And what she did was exactly what you're describing. She helped me to trust and to redefine the language and the path to interpreting and following our purpose and our calling. So, and that's why we're here today is largely because of that pivotal moment that you, Rainbow Unicorn. Sunny had beautiful colors in her tresses, multicolors.
What was that? Was like in 2013 or something?
I think so. Yes. Yes. Okay. So back to this now, a couple things. You have just mentioned a radio show, and so it's the first time I think we've talked about it here. I'm going to ask the next question, and maybe part of the answer includes the radio show. What actions did you take to shift in to following your calling into your new work?
Yeah. all I can really say is that there were breadcrumbs that were appearing before me, and it was up to me whether I would pick them up and follow that trail. And one of those was I moved from Austin, Texas to Seattle, Washington. And there was this funny little AM station here that did positive talk format, which is very different than anything I've been used to in the past. And I heard a little call during one of the little advertisements that said, "See how easy it is to become part of our family of broadcasters." And I could have ignored that. I could have not written down the number. I could have written down the number and never called, but I called. And it just was one thing after another. And I discovered it was easier than I thought. And I found my happy place in the broadcasting, in the studio, doing broadcasting, which I'd never done before. So of course there was fear, and of course there was like, how is this going to work? But I just kept following breadcrumbs. And it was the same thing. I think, and I may not have even finished my train of thought earlier, and I apologize, but I fell into being a coach. I did not set out to be a coach. I set out to stay in Martha Beck's orbit because her work had been so pivotal. I just knew that it was part of my path to continue to learn from her. And I happened to be traveling abroad. I had 1,000 unread emails. I had like a day of stopover time where I actually had internet access for the first time in a little while. And the first email that popped up was, "Register now for life coach training," which started the month, ironically, that I was going to get back. I mean, that's not ironic. It was not coincidental. It was serendipitous. So instead of thinking about it and researching coach training schools and whatever, I just hit register now. I say it was like straight from my heart to the button on the screen. And I showed up and I went through coach training, and imagine that. I really enjoyed sitting across from someone and talking to them about what they were going through. And actually I'd considered psychology when I was younger, but law school seemed like it was more impressive for my family or whoever that I was trying to impress. So I actually ended up in a roundabout way coming back to the work of service that I really had wanted to do when I was much younger. And so I just, to answer the question, long story long, I followed the breadcrumbs.
Beautiful. You reference a little bit what you let go of, and it sounds like a lot to follow those breadcrumbs. Security. Yeah. Tell us a little bit more about what you let go of in order to shift into what you do now.
Yeah. So and I talk about this in the book, so this isn't private information or anything, but when I got married, I gave up my right to a community estate, basically. And there was a long story behind it. If you want to know, just, I will gladly give away a free copy of the book to anyone who wants it so they can find out. But anyway, when I walked away from the marriage, there was no guarantee that I would take more than like my wedding ring and my car with me. And my pain of staying put had exceeded my fear of the unknown at that point, and I just knew that I had to go. But it was a struggle for a really long time because, Jennifer, as I've shared, I think, with you in the past and in our training that we did together, my entire self-worth was wrapped up in money and education. And to take those away and to take away this beautiful Instagram perfect life, I really believed like no one would want to hang out with me anymore. I had nothing to offer anymore. I was like a turtle without a shell. But I knew that it was something that I had to do. And ultimately, it allowed me to connect with who I really was. And, you know, the Teilhard de Chardin quote that we are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. And I'm not shy about telling people now that is absolutely my foundation. And that is where my worth comes from now. So yeah, it sucked in the beginning because I was scared and I didn't know what I was going to do to support myself. I didn't know what was going to happen. But ultimately when I made the leap, the net did appear. And now I have a foundation that is like a house can be built upon. Whereas I didn't have that before. It was, as I said, a house of cards. It was very flimsy.
Wow, I just get chills of truth hearing that story, Sunny. It's amazing. Tell me how you now define success.
Yeah, you could probably tell how I would have defined it in the past. Now I define it as an abundance of health, wealth, and love. And so what level of that for each person, it's unique to the person. And I always say there's that, but success to me is when I truly, and Abraham Hicks speak, tapped in, tuned in, turned on to what I truly am. Like, I am connected to something, whatever it is, the intelligence of the universe, I don't know, spirit, source, whatever you want to call it. But when I'm tapped into that, that is when my batteries are charged, and then I can really access the health, the wealth, and the love from a greater place. Yeah. So that's success to me now.
Wow. What a beautiful definition. I can hear the broadcaster in you. You hold those quotes very well. I love it. Sunny, what now wants to come through you and your work?
Oh, it really is, I talk about the We Portal where I connect with people, because I'm passionate about people being in good relationships so that they can have all of their life force energy to go and create and do the work they came here to do. But ultimately, I really want to connect people. I want to connect people to who they really are, which to me is magnificent spiritual beings stuffed into little human bodies, doing really cool stuff and experiencing really crazy things while they're on this funny little like marble that's hurtling through space. So yeah, connecting them with peace, joy, freedom, and purpose. And there's not much more that when I think about my life, those were the things that I desired so deeply in that past chapter, and I didn't have them. And I know what amazing things can happen when we are tapped into that kind of a life of peace, of joy, of freedom, of purpose. So yeah, that's what I feel called to do.
Beautiful. And in terms of the legacy you want to leave, is there anything more you want to add to that?
I want to write a lot more books, because I will just say those have been the most pivotal to me in my transformation, and in terms of feeding me so that I can in turn hopefully feed others. And so yeah, many more books, and hopefully a syndicated radio show that people can go back to for years to listen to the past podcast recordings.
Yay. I'm holding that vision, Sunny. I love it. Okay, last question. What advice would you give for someone who isn't sure of his or her purpose?
Yes. So I've done a little class on calling several times, because I'm fascinated by this, about what constitutes a calling. How do you recognize a calling? And one of the things that stood out to me was a quote from Poe Bronson, which I'm not going to try. It's like a paragraph long, so I'm just going to paraphrase it here. But he studied thousands of people in his research and asked them basically how their calling came about. And one of the primary themes that came through in all these interviews was that it often came as a whisper. Some people, you hear stories about someone was at a stoplight and this just big divine download came through with a blueprint for their right life and calling and all this. And I totally hold space for that, absolutely, but that wasn't my experience, and it hasn't been the experience of a lot of my clients. So allow it to be a whisper that then becomes a little bit of a stronger voice, and then a little bit of a stronger voice, until it finally becomes a roar. But it takes a lot of nurturance to do that. I don't even know, is that a word? Nurturing? Takes a lot of nurturing to do that. And while you're in that process of nurturing the whisper, in my experience, it was damn uncomfortable. It took me out of my comfort zone. So I had to get really comfortable with being uncomfortable. And finally, there was a book that was more just, it was right up there with a lot of the Martha Beck and my really greatest teachers of my heart in this lifetime. But Stephen Pressfield in The War of Art talks about using your resistance as a compass, pointing due north, exactly where you are supposed to go. So every time I'm feeling a lot of fear, a lot of resistance, my belief is that I need to lean into the discomfort and the resistance. So nurture the whisper, lean into the discomfort, go toward the resistance.
Bam. It's that easy over the course of a little bit of time and a little bit of practice.
Right.
I love it. Yeah, I think I defined it as a trumpet from on high, that you will be an astronaut, and that people who were called got this really clear guidance. And then all they had to do was follow the rules
Yeah.
to reach those things. And I had none of that at all. And so for me as well, this process, and part of the reason I'm doing this series, is to show all the other avenues, all the other paths that there are to purpose besides just angels singing a really clear note. Because for me, the whispers, I couldn't always hear them, or didn't know what they were. And I think you mentioned this somewhere along the way of our relationship, about sometimes you just try something on, you go out in the world and you practice it and gather more data about how that fits into purpose. And I didn't understand any of that before. So thank you so much for sharing your story and your path following your own breadcrumbs. And I think it gives so much hope to me, and hopefully to others, just to see that there are different ways that we can get the download, and that it can come in chapters, in quote to quote.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Sunny McMillan, for joining us today on Rain Sessions.
Thank you.